The restaurant became completely silent when the black belt slammed his palm onto the counter and laughed at the waitress in front of everyone. He had spent the entire evening treating her like she was invisible, but now he had decided to make her the entertainment of the room. What he didn't know was that the quiet woman he was humiliating had a husband who had spent years learning how to remain calm when everyone else was afraid. And when the restaurant doors finally opened, the black belt's confident smile disappeared. The waitress's name was Maribel Hayes, a 31-year-old woman who worked the afternoon shift at a small family restaurant called Harbor Lane. She was the kind of person customers remembered only after they realized how often she had smiled at them. She remembered regulars' coffee orders, carried extra napkins to elderly customers before they asked, and once spent her entire break helping a little boy find the toy car he had dropped beneath a table. Her life wasn't easy. She and her husband, Calder Hayes, had recently moved into a small rented house after Calder returned from military service. They were trying to rebuild their lives quietly, one paycheck at a time. Calder had been away for years, serving as a Navy SEAL, and his return should have been the happiest chapter of their marriage. Instead, coming home had brought its own challenges. He was learning how to sleep through ordinary noises, how to sit in crowded rooms without automatically watching every exit, and how to become a husband again instead of constantly being a soldier. Maribel never complained about any of it. She loved him deeply, and she knew that the man who had returned was still the same person she had married, even if some parts of him had become quieter. Every morning before work, she left a note beside his coffee. Sometimes it said something simple like, "Remember to eat." Other times she wrote little jokes because she knew laughter helped. Calder kept every note in a wooden box beside his bed. That afternoon, a group of martial artists entered Harbor Lane after finishing a tournament at a nearby sports center. Among them was Rhett Calloway, a celebrated black belt who had recently won a regional championship. He was tall, muscular, confident, and surrounded by people who constantly told him how talented he was. Winning had changed him. At first, martial arts had taught him discipline. But somewhere along the way, applause had replaced humility. Rhett noticed Maribel immediately because she accidentally placed a glass of water on the wrong side of his table. It was an innocent mistake. She apologized and corrected it within seconds. Most customers would have forgotten about it. Rhett didn't. He laughed loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Maribel quietly returned to the kitchen. A few minutes later, he called her back because his food was taking longer than expected. She explained that the restaurant was unusually busy and that his order would arrive shortly. Rhett leaned back and smiled in a way that made several other customers uncomfortable. He asked whether she was always this slow. Maribel ignored the insult and promised to check on the order. The kitchen was overwhelmed. There were families waiting, delivery orders being prepared, and 2 employees had called in sick. Maribel was doing everything she could. But Rhett had decided that wasn't enough. When she returned, he deliberately pushed his plate toward her and told her she should learn how to serve people properly. A few people at nearby tables looked away. Nobody wanted trouble. Maribel remained calm. She apologized again. Rhett laughed. He asked whether she was afraid of him. She said no. That answer irritated him. He stood up. The restaurant became quieter. Rhett told her that people like her should understand who they were dealing with. He mentioned his black belt, his championship, and the years he had trained. He spoke as though wearing a belt around his waist made him more important than everyone else. Maribel simply looked at him. She didn't insult him. She didn't challenge him. She just asked him to sit down because other customers were uncomfortable. That made him even angrier. Rhett stepped closer. He wanted her to feel small. He told her that she had no idea who she was dealing with. Maribel's hands trembled slightly. Not because she was impressed. Because she hated conflict. She had spent years learning how to keep peace. She quietly stepped backward. Then Rhett made his biggest mistake. He reached toward her wrist. Before he could touch her, the restaurant door opened. Calder Hayes walked inside. He wasn't wearing a military uniform. He wore faded jeans, a dark shirt, and an old watch. He had come to surprise his wife by picking her up from work. He stopped when he saw Rhett standing over her. For several seconds, Calder said nothing. He looked at Maribel first. Then at Rhett. Then at the hand hovering near his wife's arm. Something in Calder's expression changed. It wasn't anger. That was what made it frightening. He simply became completely still. Maribel immediately recognized that look. She walked toward him. Calder asked if she was okay. She nodded. He asked whether the man had touched her. Maribel quietly said that he had tried. Calder looked at Rhett. The black belt immediately began explaining himself, boasting about his training and saying that Calder should stay out of it. Calder didn't respond to the insults. He asked Rhett to step away from his wife. Rhett laughed. He couldn't understand why this ordinary-looking man wasn't intimidated. He asked Calder whether he even knew who he was. Calder glanced briefly at Rhett's black belt. Then he looked back at him. He said that a belt was supposed to represent discipline, not permission to disrespect people. The room became silent. Rhett's friends stopped smiling. Calder didn't threaten him. He didn't brag about his military service. He didn't need to. He simply stood between Rhett and Maribel. Rhett stepped forward again. Calder calmly told him to stop. Something about the man's composure made Rhett hesitate. Then Rhett suddenly tried to shove him. Calder moved only enough to protect himself and redirect the movement. Rhett lost his balance and stumbled several feet away. Nobody was seriously hurt, but the message was unmistakable. Calder hadn't attacked him. He had simply refused to be moved. Rhett stared at him. He asked who Calder was. Calder didn't answer. Instead, he asked Maribel if she wanted to leave. She nodded. But before they could go, the restaurant manager stepped forward. He had already called security, and 2 officers arrived shortly afterward. Rhett immediately began telling everyone that Calder had attacked him. One of the officers asked Calder what happened. Calder calmly explained. Several customers confirmed his story. Then an older man sitting near the window stood up. He had watched everything. He told the officer that Calder had tried repeatedly to avoid the confrontation. Another customer agreed. Rhett's story began falling apart. Then one of Rhett's own teammates quietly admitted that Rhett had been provoking Maribel for several minutes. The room went silent again. Rhett looked embarrassed. But Calder wasn't interested in humiliating him. He simply told the officer that he didn't want anything further to happen if Rhett was willing to leave peacefully. That surprised everyone. Even Rhett. After the officers escorted Rhett outside, Maribel hugged her husband. Calder held her tightly. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Maribel whispered that she was proud of him. Calder told her that he wasn't proud of the part where he had to step between her and another man. He was proud that she had remained calm. He said she hadn't allowed someone else's arrogance to change who she was. That night, they went home together. Maribel cooked dinner while Calder sat at the kitchen table. She noticed his hands were shaking slightly. She understood immediately. The confrontation had brought back memories he rarely talked about. She reached across the table and held his hand. Calder admitted that sometimes he was afraid of becoming the man the world had trained him to be. He had spent years being taught to react instantly, protect people, and survive dangerous situations. But coming home had taught him something different. Sometimes strength meant walking away. Sometimes strength meant asking for help. And sometimes strength meant standing beside someone without needing to prove anything. Maribel smiled. She told him that was exactly why she loved him. Weeks passed. The story spread around the local martial arts community. Rhett's championship reputation suffered. But something unexpected happened. His instructor contacted Calder. He didn't ask for a fight. He asked Calder to speak to the students about discipline and responsibility. Calder initially refused. Then Maribel encouraged him. She reminded him that if one arrogant person could misuse martial arts, perhaps someone like Calder could help young students understand what strength was supposed to mean. So Calder visited the dojo. He stood in front of a room filled with young martial artists. He didn't demonstrate complicated techniques. He didn't talk about military missions. He simply told them that the strongest person in a room wasn't always the loudest. He told them that anyone could learn how to throw a punch. The difficult part was learning when not to. The students listened. Rhett was there too. He stood in the back. He looked uncomfortable. After the class, he approached Maribel. He apologized. Not because someone had forced him. Because he finally understood what he had done. Maribel accepted the apology. She told him she hoped he would become the kind of black belt his belt was supposed to represent. Rhett lowered his head. He said he would try. Months later, Rhett became one of the dojo's most disciplined instructors. He never forgot the day a quiet waitress had refused to become cruel simply because someone was cruel to her. And he never forgot the quiet man who had walked through the restaurant doors without shouting, threatening, or boasting. Calder never told most people about his Navy SEAL background. To him, it wasn't something to use as intimidation. It was simply part of his past. His real pride was different. It was Maribel. It was their little home. It was the notes she still left beside his coffee. And every evening, when Calder came home, Maribel would smile and ask him the same simple question. "How was your day?" And Calder would smile because after everything he had survived, there was only one answer that truly mattered.